The speed at which I learn languages skyrocketed because of one simple article. For the last 2 years I've been using it like crazy, and the progress is showing. I mean, I've been stuck at the A2 level with my German for long years. But once I started to use this method, in 2 months I got from A2 to B2. Same for my Japanese. I've been like at nothing for months, even a year. I've been at nothing. Then I started to use this method, and bam, now I can read books, not to study, but just for fun, for the sake of it. Let me explain it to you. The vocabulary size you need for each CFR level is pretty much set. So 1000 words A1, 2000 words A2, B1 needs 4000 words, B2 6000 words, and then C1 needs about 10,000 words and C2 needs 16,000 words and more. But the higher the level the word is, the lower its frequency of showing up. So, in other words, you would almost never see a C2 word, while an A1 word you would hear in every conversation, in every page. That's why once you get to 9000 words, so really close to C1 level, you can read pretty much anything, simply because the chance of a C1 or C2 level word is so small. Now, how are you supposed to learn these 9000 words? It's actually pretty simple. You just put them into your brain, with books, and nothing else. The reason for that being that when you read a book, you read it at the pace, the average pace is 250 words per minute. While the other alternative, movies, take you at the pace of 83 words per minute. You can see that we almost tripled our speed of learning simply because we chose the correct medium, books win. Since we now know that we need 9000 words and that we need books to learn a language quickly, we can go to this Paul Nation guy, a really cool linguist, and his study gives us the exact number of tokens that we need to process to get to each level. In other words, the number of words we need to process to get to the level we want. For example, once you learn your first 1000 words, you want to get to the next 1000. You want to know 2000 words. You have to read 170,000 words to progress to that. Once you want to learn another 1000, progress from 2000 to 3000, you have to read 300,000 words. So first we know 1000 words, we read 170,000 words, we get to 2000 words in our vocabulary. Next, we read 300,000 words. We get to 3000 words in our vocabulary. Next, we want to get to 4000 words. So we read 530,000 words. And that gets us to 4000 words in our vocabulary. You can see that as we increase our level, our vocabulary in our brains increases. The difficulty of learning new words increases as well. I mean, first we had to process 170,000 words, then 300,000 words, then 530,000 words, and so on and so on. And all of that each time for 1000 words in our vocabulary. Though it kind of makes sense, because of Zipf's law. Zipf said that the higher the level a word is, the lower its frequency of showing up. So if you take a C2 word, which honestly never shows up, it's obvious you wouldn't be able to learn it through reading, since you can't read it if it isn't there. Now, if we take into account the fact that each book has about 100,000 words, in other words, input tokens, and we know the number of input tokens we need for each level, which means that we can calculate the number of books to read for each level. Since you can't really read a book with zero vocabulary, however, I recommend you learn the first 1000 words with Duolingo, or maybe some lessons, whatever you think is best for you, and then continue on with this method, because of just how much faster it is when compared to other mediums. After you learn your first 1000 words with Duolingo or lessons, you can get to 2000 words, get through the next 1000 words of vocabulary with 2 books. Then, to get through another 1000 words, you need 3 books. Then, to get through another 1000, to get from 3000 words of vocabulary to 4000, you need 6 books. All the way up to 25 books that will allow you to get from 8000 words to 9000 words. To sum it all up, once you get to A1 level, so your first 1000 of Duolingo words, you can get to A2 level with 2 books. To get to B1 level, you need 9 books, then to B2 level, you need 22 books, and then to get from B2 level to really close to C1, cutting it close to C1, you need 61 books. So how long would it take you to get that far? To know 9000 words and to read 94 books to get through really close to C1. Since we know that you read at an average pace of 250 words per minute, and that together all these books add up to 11 million words that you need to process as input tokens, we can calculate that if you wanted to do it all in a year, you would have to read for 2 hours each day to get to 733 hours total. Or you simply learn up to the B1 level, which is almost nothing, 4000 words in comparison to the 9000 words, and 1 million input tokens in comparison to the 11 million input tokens. And the benefit is almost the same. So if we calculate it all, 67 hours. Honestly, at the pace of 2 hours a day, you would get through 1 million words in a month. 1 month, B1 level. Cool, right?